member ID, the provider member name, and date of birth. The upper left-hand corner, there's an icon, and it says Scanned Pages. That's going to be the medical record. To the far right-hand side, we have the windows that will demonstrate our coded data, and then in the middle of the screen is the data entry portion. The first thing I'll do is open the chart. I'll click on this icon, and it'll open a separate window. When I do this, two things. You must use Google Chrome to do the work. The pop-up medical record documentation does not behave very well with any other internet browser, so make sure you're using Google Chrome. Also very important, the very first time you open a chart, it will get a pop-up blocker. So that means that it'll pop up to the very top menu bar. It'll be a little icon with a red X. If you click on that, it'll give you an option to always allow, and then you'll click on this icon again. Very important, because it'll look like you're clicking on the chart and nothing's happening, but really it's just blocking the pop-up. It will only happen the very first time, and then once you always allow pop-ups from the site, it won't ever happen again. So it is just a small thing to do the very first time. Because the chart opens in a separate window, you can move it to a second monitor, you can move it around your screen, you can resize it. You cannot zoom in or out on the image. That is something that does not exist currently in the functionality. So, you can't double click to zoom. There isn't that capability. In order to navigate the chart, to show a few things, in the upper left corner we have demographics. So this is the name, ID, and date of birth of the member, which should match, and the provider name. Down the left-hand side, we have the page numbers, and you can navigate through the page numbers by browsing and clicking on each page separately. But the most important thing here is that each of these pages needs to be marked as reviewed in order to complete the chart. So navigating through the pages, the best practice would be to select this reviewed button here, and as I click that reviewed button, it's paging me forward, and it's also indicating each page as reviewed. So I can use my previous button to go back. I use my reviewed button to go forward. The other thing I can do is, if I realize that any of the pages of this medical record belong to a different member, I would use this does not belong functionality. By clicking on this button, it will identify that particular page or the pages you use it for with something that says doesn't belong. When you find that, you will have to send an email with only the member ID and the provider ID. We do not want to see member names, provider names, date of birth. We don't want to see that information. It is PHI. So the member ID and the provider ID, and in the subject you'll note mixed record or page doesn't belong, so I know why you're sending it. So again, every page must be marked reviewed, otherwise the chart will remain incomplete. Very important. So once I'm ready to enter the data service, I'll come into the data entry screen and click in the DOS from field. And once I'm here, I'm going to type in the data service. When I hit the tab key, it's going to automatically populate that same date into the DOS through column. When I hit tab again, it'll take me to my diagnosis code. In this field, I will enter the diagnosis that I see. If I try to enter a diagnosis code that doesn't meet the criteria, so for example, I'm trying to enter an ICD-10 code for a data service that requires ICD-9, when I hit the tab key, it's going to give me an error. It's going to say invalid diagnosis code. Please enter correct code. So I'm going to need to delete that and go back and key the proper code. As I start to do that, it will demonstrate options below when I'm in the right place. I'll continue to add characters. We do not use decimals, so you will enter the characters of the diagnosis code without decimals until you've entered all of your characters to the high specificity. Once you've done that, you'll hit the tab key and it'll populate for you the description, the service provider, which automatically populates from the provider name here associated to the chart. You'll select source, which is always provider notes, and then you'll have the opportunity to put in error flags. One thing to notice is this little tiny number here to the right of the source. What that is it's the page number that you're coding from. So whatever page of the chart is highlighted in bold red font will be the page number that populates here that the diagnosis code is attributed to. So make sure that you are on the page that you want to be on when you're keying that particular piece of information. The next thing is this little notepad with a pencil. These are our error flags. These are the standard error flags that we use for our Medicare Advantage. These are very common, pretty much the same as you would see most places. Missing or eligible provider is probably one of the most common ones. In this example, you can select one or you can select more than one, however many apply to this particular visit. And once you've done that, you can apply them to all diagnoses, meaning every error flag that you've selected and all the comments you've written will be applied to every diagnosis code for this date of service. You can also apply just to this diagnosis, which means that everything you've indicated on the screen here will apply only to the one diagnosis code. So you can choose which one is applicable, and then you'll click that. Now you can have different ones as well. So let's say you select the signature for all, and then you enter a diagnosis code here that you, let's see here, that you want to say is listed but not assessed and treated. I'll apply that just to this diagnosis. So there is that flexibility. When I'm done entering all of my diagnosis codes for this date of service, I'm going to save them. When I save them, they'll populate in this little box to the right-hand side under 2015. That way you can keep track and see everything that you're coding as you go along. If at any point you come to the realization that you've made a mistake or you forgot something or you want to update it, all you need to do is simply click on the data service on any of the rows and it'll repopulate onto your coding screen. You can change anything you need to change and hit tab to go across, or you can delete entirely. So this little icon here with the red X will delete the row entirely. And once I've made the updates necessary, I can just simply save my diagnoses. And when I've done that, now you see that there's nothing there because I've deleted them. So at this point, one of the other things I want to demonstrate are the chart notes. So here we have this little icon here for chart notes. If I click on that, it's going to open a small pop-up window. These are error flags that are to be used only on the chart level when it applies to the entire chart. So let's say, for example, I come to a chart, I have reviewed all the pages, but the whole chart is 2016 dates of service. This project is for 2015 only. So I'll click on the no date of service available to code, and I will make a comment to say that there's only 2016 dates available in the medical record. The other thing that I can do is, in the example where I've reviewed the whole medical record and all of the diagnoses, none of them are HCCs. I would indicate no HCCs. If the entire medical record that you've reviewed each page demonstrates that none of them are codable face-to-face encounters, then you would put here, not an eligible face-to-face encounter, and you would make the indication, chart, diagnostic, radiology only. So again, the chart note is applicable only when the entire medical record meets the criteria. You still need to mark each page as reviewed to demonstrate that you've reviewed all the pages. Once you've completed coding for this member and this chart, you can go here back to this Providers tab where you have the alternate medical record for that member and proceed to code it. Or if you're complete with both charts, then you'll return to the Members tab where you can choose your next member. At any given point, if I have charts that are incomplete because all the pages have not been marked as reviewed, they will remain in this particular tab that says incomplete. The only time you'll see this incomplete tab appear is when you have charts that are left incomplete. But if all of your charts are complete, you won't see that tab available. So now what I'll do is I'm going to go in and show you a coded chart and what it looks like. So this is one that's been completed, and you can see how it populates multiple dates of service. I think someone in one of the other trainings asked what the significance of the font difference was. So the red font is going to be ICD-10, and the black font is going to be ICD-9. So there is a distinction that's very visible so that you can see when the code set changes. The other thing I want to take a moment to go over with you are the error flags. This has been a common question, and so I'll go ahead and address it. I will be working on, because there are so many of you working this project, I want to make sure that I clarify. I will